Welcome to all audience to another segment of Money Talks with
The Wealth Whisperer.
Today, my intent is to not only be educational, but let's have a little fun. Besides running the podcast, I also happen to be the president and owner and founder of DLAC Wealth Advisors. So what I did today is I've invited 3 of my younger staff to participate in a game show that we're going to call Financial Squares. Words to live by or take with a grain of salt. The premise of the podcast today is that the investment industry has so many sayings or rules of thumb. Often over my career, it has become pretty frustrating because on some of these, you have to take them with a grain of salt. Because if you don't personalize them, then you sort of get lost in really the best way that I can explain it is it could lead to bad financial decisions. And what kind of podcast am I running if I'm sharing things with people and ultimately after the share, they are inadequately prepared to make a decision and make a poor financial decision? All right. So like I said, we're going to have a little fun. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do this game show. We're going to have 9 rules of thumb. And I'm going to state the financial industry's rule of thumb. And then I'm going to ask the contestants, is this words to live by or take with a grain of salt? Contestants that answer the question first with the right answer will get 10 points. A wrong answer takes away 5 points. Okay? After the first 9 questions have been put forward, whichever 2 contestants have the highest score will go on to the finals. In the finals, we're going to have everybody with their final answer write their answer, lift it up. So everybody, it's not a race. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to provide their answer. The person who, if they both have the right answer, the person with the better explanation will get the final 20 points. If they both get it wrong, no points will be rewarded. All right, so let's jump on in and have a little fun. The first question in our game show, Financial Squares. Words to live by or take with a grain of salt. Buy low and sell high. Evan.
Bob, I'll take rules to live by.
That's correct. Tell me why.
I know markets can have varied valuations, but we look over time, and at any point in history, we would buy the S&P when the PE ratio is below 15. I think your performance would be far superior than that of someone who would have sold after market valuations dropped significantly or purchased at market highs.
Absolutely. Maybe someday will come when buying low doesn't work. But as far as history has gone, I sort of use this line is there are opportunities that present themselves that 1 or 2 things are going to occur. I'm going to make a fantastic return or the world's going to come to an end. If the world's going to come to an end, who really cares anyway? So for the time being, buy low and sell high, words to live by. Move on to question 2. Words to live by or take with a grain of salt? You should always refi your mortgage when interest rates have gone down by 1%. Anthony.
Bob, I believe that would be take it with a grain of salt.
Correct. Why?
My handful of years in the industry and from having worked with you, every answer comes down to math. Let me give you an example. Say I had a $50,000 mortgage and rates went from 7 to 2%. But my situation was that I lived in New York. I was potentially planning on moving within the next couple of years, and it cost $10,000 to refinance your mortgage. In that situation, there's no way to recoup the losses from my refinance. And assuming I'd used the savings in excess each year to pay off the refi balance. I'll give you an opposite example. I have a $1 million mortgage and I live in the state of Ohio. In Ohio, you can refinance for less than $1,000, and I had no intention of moving. In that instance, 1.5% or 0.5% is easy to justify the refinance you take. It all comes down to doing a break-even analysis, which shows us that the $5,000 you save on interest with your new rate will more than cover the balance of the refi.
Beautiful. You just gave an absolute great example. I get to question all the time, and I really just make sure what people do is they personalize it. Great job, Anthony. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to number 3, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. You should always have 6 months of living expenses in savings in case of loss of job or an emergency. Danielle.
I would take that with a grain of salt.
All right, we got the girl in there. We got a correct answer for her. Danielle, tell me why.
I have come to learn there can be many forms of liquidity that some families may be able to tap. I can agree if one has very limited other resources, it's not a bad rule of thumb. But if a family has assets, there are numerous other ways that they can access liquidity should an emergency arise, like losing one's job, etc. If you have lots of equity in your home and you have a one-income family, get an equity line. They are mostly free to have unless you need to borrow off of it, but it's there in case. If you have a brokerage account, you can use margin or non-purpose loan. Both margin and equity lines are open lines, which means you do not have to have any amortization. You pay back the debt when you can. Often it will become very high priority to pay back soon as you get to the back end of what caused that emergency.
Great answer. Liquidity. There's a multitude of different ways that you could tap liquidity. Unfortunately, if you're 22, 23, 24 years old, there may not be a lot of access to liquidity. But by the time you're in your 40s, hopefully you've accumulated brokerage accounts as noted and, maybe have some equity in a home. There's different ways that you can create liquidity without it having sometimes to be stagnant or unproductive in a bank account. All right. 10 points across the board. I'm liking it. We got a competition going on here. All right, number 4. Contestants ready? Words to live by or take with a grain of salt. An employee should always max out their 401k before giving consideration to saving money into any other type of future goal. Evan?
Bob, would this be one with a grain of salt?
Great answer. Why?
Now, many people have a multitude of savings goals other than saving for retirement. People will all have many types of items to save for, although I would agree with this statement in terms of when it comes to saving for retirement, we believe getting that employer match should be a focus. It's all about getting that free money.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I felt this was probably the easiest question that I had come up with is almost always a family is going to have a multitude of goals and you need to be paying your attention to each of them. So totally agree to a certain extent. There's a level of hierarchy, and it's like, okay, what's my match? I'm getting a match or someone's giving me free money. It's probably going to be pretty high. I have other examples where, hey, I have 21% credit card debt. Should I be maxing out my 401k? Well, you know what? That's pretty easy. No, you should probably not be maxing out your 401k if you are paying 21% interest on a credit card. All right, you guys are doing a great job. Evan takes the lead. 20, 10, 10. On to question 5. Words to live by or take with a grain of salt. The amount an investor should have in stocks should be determined by taking 100 and subtracting one's age. Anthony.
Absolutely, this should be taken with a grain of salt.
I agree. Tell me why.
I'll give you a simple example again, if I can, Bob, to debunk the rule of thumb. Let's take a 75-year-old person that between their Social Security, their pension, and dividends on their investments, they'll never touch the principal again. Another thing to consider is that their heirs are financially well off as well. The risk tolerance should always be determined by evaluating 2 things: how you feel about risk and your personal situation. So if this person is willing to assume risk of equities and they will not be taking any distributions for years or even decades to come, clearly this makes the rule of thumb something to take with a grain of salt.
I agree with your explanation also. Absolutely. There's going to be a number of situations where, people are getting older, but then you start thinking that multi-generational. Am I really saving this money for me and my spouse? Or am I saving this for my kids and grandkids? And if my kids are in a pretty darn good financial spot, they don't need access to the money, this money may stay invested for a long, long time, as noted. Excellent. All right, Danielle, we got you behind by 10 points from the young men. We're all rooting for you, so step it up. Okay, on the number 6, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. A good number to consider when determining the size of one's mortgage payment is 28% of the family's gross income. Danielle.
I wish that were a rule to live by, but unfortunately, I'm also going to have to take this with a grain of salt.
I agree. Why?
Real estate agents may be okay taking that level of debt versus income, but one would quickly find it very hard to heat their home and eat if 28% of their gross income went to their mortgage. Since I've heard you speak about the subject, I have come to agree that for a working family, 16% is probably a much better goal.
This has maybe caused the most frustration for me over time, is I'm sort of get on my little rock here. And when you do business with a professional who is paid by the size of the transaction, you always need to sort of understand any conflicts of interest. So I'm not saying a lot of people do this, but certainly many of us have probably experienced it. And that's why, what Danielle has said is I've done a lot of analysis, and, if you're retired, this number that we're providing may not be relevant. But if you're in your working years, it's a number that I feel really allows, as Danielle said, allows for those other bills to also be paid in unison, and then maybe have some money to save for your future. All right, on to question number 7. We are all tied up. 20. All right, contestants, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. As it pertains to life insurance owned, one should always have 5 to 10 times of their income as recommended by many of the industry leaders. Evan.
Bob, I'll be taking this one with a grain of salt as well.
I agree. Tell me why.
I think that this is very situationally based on what your needs would be for life insurance. If you're 65 years old, you have $5 million, you got Social Security coming in, you got a pension as well, and you're also living off your dividends from your account, I'm not necessarily sure you need 5 to 10 times your income on life insurance. Now, on the other side of that, maybe you're 35 and you're the sole provider in your household. It might make sense to have yourself covered in case something were to ever happen.
Another great one to personalize. Yep, good explanation. Yeah, you absolutely need to personalize that. Is your unique situation is going to help you evaluate how much it is that you truly need, and then, in essence, discuss it amongst the family and make sure that everybody's comfortable, because I do think it is a very important decision. All right, let's move on to number 8. As Eben takes the lead, 30-20-20. Okay, contestants, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. Diversify, diversify, diversify. Words investors should live by. Anthony, going to give it a try? You go ahead, young man.
Yes, words to live by.
Correct. Tell us why.
So not only should you diversify positions in your portfolio, but your registrations as well. This will create a positive impacts in retirement, allowing you to manipulate the tax code while in your retirement. So say we have 2 types of asset classes over 20 years. One has earned 10% and the other 4%. These classes are held in my 2 registrations. One is a 401k and the other is a Roth. The 401k is taxed at my federal tax rate on withdrawals, so that's 22%. The federal government will take that percent of your money, and while the Roths, they won't take anything. So, question is, where would you want to put the asset that earns 10%?
This actually is an interesting one of late. We've had these instances back in the day of the Nifty 50. If you don't know much about it, you may want to look it up. 2000 and current, where we get this massive concentration of returns. And people start to believe, well, why do I diversify when all the gains seem to be getting achieved from this, one area? So, as he said, I agree totally, is that you got to live by it, because the downside of being wrong is so much more painful to the potential upside. Your number one goal, in my opinion, as an investor, needs to always be, I want to minimize my chances that I don't attain my goal. All right, fantastic. Question 9, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. One should create a budget for needs, wants, and savings. Danielle?
I would take that with a grain of salt.
Sorry, Danny, I think I'm going to disagree with you on this one. Let's do this. Do you have an explanation as to why? No, you got nothing, huh? Okay, here's sort of why I say that it's a good rule of thumb. I guess if she would have came back and said, hey, how about somebody who's in retirement? Do they need to have a budget for savings? Well, yeah, probably not. I probably then would have had to agree with you. But since you couldn't give me explanation, we're going to go with, everybody to a certain extent should be going through some level of an exercise. Let's be realistic. There's a number of people out there that are just not that organized or detail-oriented, that they're going to weekly go through every last expense and categorize it and hold themselves accountable. But should everybody with the technology that exists today at least be able to take a couple of hours a year, to download the information, categorize it, which a lot of it's already being done by the technology, and sort of just getting a feel for whether they should hold themselves accountable? I'm sorry. I'm going to sit here today and say absolutely that this is a rule of thumb to live by. All right, so we got our finalists. We got Anthony. We got Evan. Danielle, thank you. There's going to be all sorts of fantastic parting gifts for you to enjoy. All right, maybe not, but have a great day. Thank you. We appreciate you participating in our game today. All right? Joe, when you're ready? Okay. Do you have your pens? Excellent. Remember, once again, you both get the opportunity. This is not a race. You both get the opportunity to provide your answer, and you may get an opportunity to provide your thoughts. Question 10, words to live by or take with a grain of salt. You should always target saving 20% of your income during your working career. Hey, we all on that one. All right, Jared, it looks like you're both writing. Great. Let's see what the boys have for us. All right, Anthony. Ooh. All right, I am going to unfortunately disagree with you. Evan. Evan, I agree with you. All right, before Anthony, we send you off with your wonderful party gifts. Evan, why don't you tell everybody out there, why would you say that you should take that with a grain of salt, that not everybody should be saving 20%?
All right, so reason why I said taking it with a grain of salt, we'll give two polar opposite examples here. Say you're 60 years old, haven't accumulated a ton of money towards retirement, and you would like to retire in these next 5 to 10 years. You're probably going to have to save more than 20% of, what you're bringing in to hit that goal of saving for retirement. Now, I'll give you total opposite side of things. Now, say you were, first job you ever got, you open up a Roth IRA, you're plugging that Roth IRA, we trickle down the road in your 40s now, right? And you probably have a few $1 million because you've done such a great job saving, you've been frugal. You may not need to save at all. And those IRA accounts could just do the rest of the work for you since you get such a great job in the beginning.
Great answer. Totally agree. Personalize things. I think ultimately if we're going to come to a conclusion, and Evan, you won the opportunity to come back and participate another day. Congratulations. All right, so if we try to get to a conclusion from the podcast today, what I'd say to the audience is you have so many of these, and it can be, to a certain extent, be pretty darn useful. But so many of you really got to personalize. So I guess I try to tell little tidbits or stories of things that I say to people all the time. And the more you learn about finances, the more you're going to be able to differentiate good information from noise. And, so I have a lot of clients over the years that, I was watching, but I didn't really expect that much. Or, hey, I was watching this, sounds pretty important. What are your thoughts? And so often I'll say, what's going to differentiate from me watching CNBC or me watching Bloomberg and, a layperson watching those shows great example, I'm going to expect that not that many in the audience reads Barron's magazine, but there's all sorts of information within Barron's magazine. It's sifting through the good information, the noise, whether it's the magazine or whether it's a CNBC show, 90% of it's going to be noise and 10% it's going to be useful. And getting that 10% or even shows 10% are useful and 90%, are best disregarded. You'll get better and better at it. So, hey, thank you for joining us today. I'll look forward to seeing you at our next podcast, or maybe even someday another podcast of Financial Squares. Have a good one.
For all podcast or guest-related questions, please email us at dlacadvisors@dlacadvisors.com. For all questions or inquiries into the services that are provided by DLAC Wealth Advisors, please contact us at elliot.singer@dlacadvisors.com. That's Elliot with 2 T's. Please also visit our description for helpful links.